My toxic parents never wanted me, so I moved out at 18, built a crochet business from scratch, and they tried to take it all away. My parents never really liked me, at least, that's how it always felt. They were high school sweethearts, inseparable back then, and even ended up going to the same college. They had these big dreams, traveling the world together, soaking up different cultures, living a life full of adventure. But all of that came crashing down when my mom found out she was pregnant, while still in college. They didn't want to keep the baby. That baby was me. But both of their parents were firmly against the idea of terminating the pregnancy, so my mom was stuck. Eventually, she dropped out of college and moved back in with her folks. She just couldn't handle the judgmental looks and the constant whispers from everyone around her. And that's how I came into this world, unplanned and unwanted. My mom resented me from the start. But my grandparents? They absolutely adored me. For a long time, I honestly thought they were my real parents and my mother was just my older sister. That's how distant she was, never spending time with me, barely looking at me, and when I did try to get her attention, she either ignored me or snapped like I'd done something awful. As for my dad, well, he was nowhere to be found. I didn't even know he existed. He and my mom were technically still dating, but he never came around. Now don't get me wrong, I get that my parents didn't want a kid. But I was a kid, and I couldn't understand why they seemed to hate me so much. Thankfully, both sets of grandparents stepped in. They took care of me, played with me, babysat me, treated me like I mattered. By the time my dad finished college, I was starting to walk and say a few words. I guess the guilt finally caught up to him, because that's when he began visiting on the weekends. I thought he was just some nice guy who was friends with my grandparents. My mom, though, she hated seeing him around me. She'd tell him to stay away, that ignoring me was for the best. But my grandparents encouraged him to spend time with me. That's how I eventually learned he was actually my father. After he landed a job, he proposed to my mom and they moved in together. My dad wanted me to come live with them, to finally start being a family. But my mom was dead set against it. She didn't want me there. My grandparents, who were getting older, pushed them to take responsibility, and eventually, though clearly reluctant, my parents agreed. So at 5 years old, I moved in with them. Saying I hated living with them doesn't even begin to cover it. It was like going from sunlight and warmth to a cold, gloomy cave. Every day, my mother reminded me I should be grateful just to live under their roof. If I stepped out of line even a little, she'd threaten to kick me out. My dad worked long hours, so he wasn't around during the day. And when he got home at night, all he wanted was peace and quiet. If I tried to talk to him, he'd tell me he didn't have the energy for me and that I should go to bed. I had gone from a home filled with love and laughter to a place where I felt like an unwanted guest. I didn't understand everything back then, I was just a kid, but I did know that I wasn't wanted. My parents never bought me toys or little treats like ice cream. Just the basics to get by. Sometimes I'd show up to school without my assignments done because no one at home helped me or even asked. When the teacher called my mom, she'd scream at me, calling me lazy and telling me it was my job to handle schoolwork on my own. I was so scared of her that I started staying up after school to finish my homework, thinking that maybe, just maybe, it would make her proud of me. But no matter how hard I tried, she never showed any warmth. My dad didn't seem to care what I was doing at school, or at home, or anywhere, really. He just carried on with his life like I wasn't part of it. As I got older, I began to notice the differences between my parents and the ones I saw at school. Other kids got hugs and smiles when they were dropped off. Their moms and dads kissed them on the forehead, asked about their day. I never got any of that. It honestly felt like I was living with two strangers. I even started wondering if maybe I wasn't really their child. Every time I visited my grandparents, I'd ask them. They'd always reassure me, yes, I was my parents' biological child. They'd just say my mom and dad needed more time to grow up. Meanwhile, my mother made sure to cut me down any chance she got. She'd make nasty remarks about my hair, my glasses, my weight. One time, she even told me that if she were in high school with me, she would have bullied me every single day. Can you imagine hearing something like that from your own mother? And then there was the milk incident. I've always been allergic to milk, my grandparents knew this well. But my mom refused to believe it. She said I was just pretending to be allergic to sound cool, that back in her day, no kid had allergies. One day, she forced me to drink a glass. I ended up in the hospital. She finally panicked when the police showed up to ask her questions. That seemed to shake her. My dad was furious with her and yelled at her, and for once, she cried. My grandparents rushed to the hospital to be with me, and while I was recovering, there were some serious conversations happening behind closed doors. After that scare, things shifted. My parents started acting a little differently toward me. My mom began waking me up for school and helping me get dressed. My dad started spending time with me in the evenings, even tucking me in at night. I don't know what changed exactly, but it felt like they had finally decided to see me as a person. It was strange at first, my mom actually asking about school, and my dad inviting me to watch football with him. That's when I started to really get to know them. Maybe I was just born with a soft heart, because somehow I never held any bitterness toward them. I was just glad to have a chance to feel like part of a family. We started going to the beach on weekends sometimes, just the three of us. And those little trips still stand out as some of my favorite memories. I stopped feeling jealous of the other kids in school, because my own parents were finally showing me a bit of love. When I turned 15, I discovered I had a real talent for crocheting. My grandma, my mom's mom, had started teaching me, and I took to it quickly. By then, my grandpa had passed away, and my grandma would crochet beautiful pieces and sell them at the local craft fair each year to earn a few extra bucks. The patterns she created were so detailed, and the colors she used were vibrant and full of life. I'd sit by her side, watching every move, soaking in every technique she showed me. The more time I spent with my grandma, learning how to crochet, the more I fell in love with it. It started as something fun, just the two of us crafting together, but slowly, it turned into a real passion. I loved the idea of creating something special and one-of-a-kind with my own hands. One day, inspired by how my grandma used to sell her handmade pieces at the local craft fair, I decided to give it a shot myself. She was thrilled and encouraged me every step of the way. So, I set up a tiny booth at the same fair where she displayed her work, and to my surprise, people loved what I made. The response was honestly overwhelming. That day, I realized that what I loved doing could actually earn me money. Word got around fast, and before I knew it, classmates, friends, and even strangers from the neighborhood started placing custom orders. Each piece I made had a personal touch, a story behind it, and people really appreciated that. There was something about owning something handmade that connected with them. As the orders kept rolling in, I found myself getting more creative. I began playing around with different textures of yarn, new color palettes, and more complicated patterns. What started as simple scarves and baby blankets eventually evolved into detailed fashion items and home decor. The compliments and returning customers just pushed me to keep improving. When I began making a decent amount of money, my grandma suggested it might be smart to open a savings account, something to set aside for college. I thought it was a great idea, so I went to talk to my parents about it. The look on their faces when I told them how much I was earning was unforgettable. Up until that point, they'd always brushed off my crocheting as some silly little hobby. But once they realized it was actually bringing in good money, their attitude flipped, and not in a good way. My dad completely lost it. He threatened to burn every single thing I'd made and went on about how he wasn't working himself to the bone just for me to waste time on useless junk. My mom, on the other hand, flat out banned me from seeing my grandma anymore. Then they demanded that I hand over every cent I had made. When I told them all the money was with grandma, they immediately called her and started yelling. But she stood her ground. She refused to give them anything. They shouted at her about how they deserved every last penny, but she wasn't having it. That was the moment it hit me, my parents hadn't changed at all. Deep down, they were still the same selfish people they'd always been. I knew I couldn't give up crocheting. It wasn't just a hobby, it was a source of income and something that might actually help me afford college someday. Considering how they were acting, I couldn't even count on them to help me go to college in the first place. So I had to take control of my own future. I came up with a plan. I started telling them that I was staying over at my best friend's house on the weekends. What they didn't know was that my best friend was in on it and totally supported what I was doing. In reality, I was going to my grandma's house so we could work on all the incoming orders together. While grandma helped me keep the business going, I started expanding online too. I set up pages on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, showing off my work and connecting with other crafters and small business owners. Social media opened up a whole new world for me. Suddenly, I wasn't just selling at the local fair, I was reaching people from all over the place. Over time, my little booth at the fair turned into a full-on online business. Grandma even helped me open a bank account, with her listed as a co-owner. I trusted her more than anyone, and thanks to her, I was able to save up everything I earned for college. She believed in me when my own parents only cared about taking what I had. Then, one day, my mom went through my phone without telling me. She found out about the business, saw my online pages, and realized I was still crocheting behind their backs. That discovery triggered one of the biggest fights we ever had. They both screamed at me and my grandma, demanding I withdraw all the money I had saved and hand it over. They said they deserved it for raising me all those years. I was barely holding back tears as I tried to explain that I wasn't hurting anyone, that I was just trying to save up for my education. My dad shouted that I had gone behind his back and that I could never be trusted again. My mom insisted I delete my Instagram page right there and then. She stood over me to make sure I did it. Instead, I cleverly deactivated the account, knowing I could reactivate it later once I was out from under their control. After that, they put some serious restrictions on me. My phone was locked down between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m., and again from midnight to 8 a.m. They started tracking my location and keeping tabs on every single website I visited. I'd even get in trouble for something as simple as browsing for underwear. They said I could hang out with friends twice a week, but I had to come straight home. If I was even a few minutes late, they'd blow up my phone and start calling my friends too. Once in a while, they'd let me visit my grandma after school, but only for a couple of hours, and crocheting was strictly forbidden. They said if they caught me doing it, they'd take away my phone and cut off my internet completely. There were so many nights I wanted to just run away and disappear. But I was still 17, and I didn't really have anywhere to go. Eventually, I asked them if I could get a part-time job at a nearby cafe. To my surprise, they said yes, but with a catch. I had to give them 30% of whatever I earned. I agreed without pushing back. Every week, I handed them their share and quietly gave the remaining 70% to my grandma to deposit into my savings. But even with the job, they didn't stop making my life difficult. They'd barge into my room without knocking, search through my messages and emails, and obsessively check my location. And if I didn't follow every rule they laid out, things would get ugly fast. Whenever I didn't follow their rules, I'd either get grounded or be forced to hand over more of the money I'd earned that week. It didn't matter how much I was doing or how hard I was working, nothing ever seemed to be enough for them. Still, I kept my head down and focused on school. I knew the only way out of that house was through college, so I gave it everything I had. I studied like my life depended on it, because in a way, it really did. The night before my 18th birthday, I quietly packed up everything I had bought with my own money. I left behind anything my parents had given me, clothes, my old phone, anything they might claim as theirs. I even wiped my phone clean, just to be safe. I knew they'd never let me leave with anything they paid for, so I made sure not to take a single thing that didn't belong to me. Grandma and I had already made a plan. Early the next morning, she pulled up to the house and picked me up. It was time to move in with her for good. When my parents saw me walking out with my bags, they lost it. They started yelling at my grandma, threatening to call the police. I looked them straight in the eye and told them to go ahead because I was officially an adult now, and there was nothing they could do to stop me. That's when the emotional blackmail started. They said they'd tell everyone how ungrateful I was, how I'd abandoned my family. They swore people would judge me, turn their backs on me. But I didn't care anymore. Then they pulled the final card. They said they wouldn't help me pay for college. I just smiled. I had already saved up enough and had a scholarship in the works. I didn't need them anymore. As I walked out the door, I felt a swirl of emotions, fear, yes, but also relief and this quiet fire of determination. I had no idea what the road ahead looked like, but I was finally free. The first few weeks living with Grandma felt like stepping into a whole new world. There were no rules hanging over my head, no one checking my messages or hovering over my shoulder. I could finally just breathe. One of the first things I did was buy myself a new phone and get a fresh number. Then, Grandma and I went to the bank. I brought all my documents and got my minor account converted into an individual account. I can't even explain how it felt to finally have my own debit card, my own money, my own choices. Next, I reactivated my Instagram account and jumped right back into crocheting. Grandma even gave me a cozy little corner of her home to set up my makeshift studio. It felt so good to get back to doing what I loved. But then, about a week after I moved out, I started hearing things from extended family and old neighbors. Apparently, my parents threw a party. Not just any party, they were celebrating their freedom. They invited all their child-free friends and basically threw a bash to mark their new life without me. There were pictures floating around of them drinking and laughing, saying they finally had the family they always wanted, one without a child. That stung more than I care to admit. Knowing that my absence was something they toasted to, it felt like a punch to the gut. My dad's parents, who traveled around a lot in their RV, hadn't heard from me in years. But when one of my cousins passed along my new number, they called right away. They asked what had happened, and I told them everything. The fights, the control, the abuse. They were horrified. They asked why I never reached out to them, and I explained how my parents had monitored everything, my phone, my calls, even my internet history. Outside of my grandma and a few close friends, I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone. That's when they told me something that stayed with me. They said my parents never wanted a child to begin with. They had hoped things would change once I moved in with them years ago, but apparently, they never truly did. They apologized over and over for not being there for me. They spoke to my grandma too and heard about everything she'd done to protect me all those years. After that, they made it their mission to tell the rest of the family the truth. And slowly, word started to spread. Relatives and family friends began calling me. Some of them I hadn't heard from in ages. They offered their support, their sympathy, and even money. I thanked them, but instead of accepting handouts, I asked them to help me in another way by spreading the word about my crocheting business so I could build something for myself. And little by little, it started to work. Around the same time, I got the email I had been waiting for. I'd been accepted into my dream college with a full scholarship. I couldn't believe it. After everything, my life was finally turning around. The college wasn't too far from Grandma's place, so I'd still be able to visit her on weekends. My dad's parents even gave me their old car. It needed a little work, but it ran fine. It made the commute so much easier, and it felt like a piece of freedom all my own. Then, one of my friends who worked for a small local newspaper reached out. She said she wanted to write a feature about me. According to her, there weren't many young entrepreneurs in our area doing what I was doing, and she thought my story could inspire other teens, especially those going through something similar. At first, I didn't think I was worth writing about. My business was still growing, still rough around the edges. But then I thought, maybe if someone out there was feeling trapped like I once did, they could read my story and feel like they weren't alone. So I agreed. When the story finally came out, it felt surreal seeing my name in print. I know it was just a local paper, but to me, it was something huge. It was proof that I'd made it through something hard and built something of my own. For the first time in a long time, I was actually proud of myself. Grandma was over the moon, and even more friends and relatives started reaching out to me after reading the article. For once, I felt like people saw me, not just the struggles, but the strength too. Getting congratulated by family and friends for my success was something entirely new to me. Growing up, I never heard words of support or praise from my parents, no matter how hard I worked. So hearing kind, genuine encouragement, it meant more than I could explain. I'm pretty sure my parents read the article too, because not long after, they called my grandma furious. They yelled at her, accusing me of betraying them by sharing my story without their permission. They claimed that since I'd started crocheting while still living under their roof, I owed them credit and a cut of the profits too. Apparently, some of our relatives had been calling them out after learning the truth about how they treated me, and they didn't like that one bit. They even threatened to take me to court. But Grandma, bless her, calmly told them that all the real work for my business had been done in her home, and if they wanted to sue, they were welcome to try. They'd lose. I was so angry at how shameless they were being. I wanted to scream, to let all my frustration out. But instead, I chose a different path. I organized a small celebration at Grandma's house. Just close friends and a few family members, people who had supported me through everything. I was about to leave for college, and I wanted one last joyful memory with the folks who genuinely cared about me. We had a lovely evening, laughing, sharing food, enjoying each other's company. Of course, word got back to my parents. And somehow, they managed to get a hold of my new phone number. They started sending me text after text, calling me names, telling me how ungrateful I was. My dad even sent a long message about how he'd spent years providing for me and now I was throwing it all away by partying with people he thought didn't matter. Funny how he forgot that he and my mom had their own celebration when I moved out. Update 1. When I first posted my story on Reddit, I didn't expect much. But it kind of blew up in just a few days. Then I started seeing bits of my story pop up on TikTok, and I'm not gonna lie, it made me nervous. I really don't want my parents stumbling across it. If you're reading this, please send up a little prayer that they never do. After reading all the comments, I know a lot of people were encouraging me to cut ties with my parents for good. I've decided I'm going to do exactly that. But before blocking them completely, I felt like I needed to say my piece. I wanted to send one last email, something that laid out everything they'd put me through. I just needed them to know. Some folks called me a doormat. But I'm not. I'm just a kid who had toxic parents, and honestly, it's hard to unlearn the idea that you have to love your parents no matter what. Society tells us they always have our best interests at heart. But no one really teaches you what to do when they're the ones hurting you. So yeah, maybe I didn't stand up for myself as quickly as I should have. But I'm learning. I'm getting there. Update 2. Hey again, thanks to everyone who reached out with support and shared their own stories. It helped more than you know. So, I did end up writing that email. Grandma helped me find the right words. Here's what I sent. Dear Mom and Dad, I've spent a lot of time thinking about our past, the present, and what kind of future, if any, we could possibly have together. It breaks my heart to say this, but I've come to the conclusion that, for my own well-being, I need to walk away. I've spent my entire life hoping for your love, trying to meet your expectations, and wondering why I was never good enough. I've bent over backward trying to make you see me, accept me, love me, but that never happened. From the earliest memories, like being forced to drink milk even though you knew I was allergic, to always feeling like an outsider in my own home, those things left scars. You might not even remember them, but I do. When I found crocheting, I finally felt like I had something that gave me purpose. Grandma's guidance gave me confidence. I thought maybe it could be a bridge between us. But instead of encouragement, you tried to tear it down. You tried to control it, demanded money, threatened legal action, and tried to shut down something that brought me joy. This isn't about revenge. I'm not angry, I'm just done. This is about protecting myself, mentally and emotionally. I'm choosing peace. I'm choosing to build a life that feels safe and full of love. I don't wish you harm. I truly hope you find happiness. But I won't be part of your lives anymore. Thank you, in a way, for forcing me to grow up fast and for showing me just how strong I could be. Please respect my decision not to have further contact. Take care, me. I won't lie, I cried while writing it. Even after everything, it's hard to say goodbye to your parents. We're raised to believe that we have to love them, that we owe them. But sometimes, loving yourself means walking away. After hitting send, I blocked them everywhere. Now, I'm getting ready to move into my college dorm. Grandma and my dad's parents are going to help me settle in, and I'm nervous, but excited too. A whole new chapter is beginning. My crocheting business is still going strong, and I have no plans to give it up. It's my passion. I love creating unique designs, and I'll keep balancing it with my studies. That's all the news for now. Update 3. Wow. It's been 6 months since that last update, and I honestly can't believe how much life has changed. First of all, college is going great. The classes are challenging, but I'm staying on top of things. I know that even with a successful side business, a degree is still something I want to have. It's my safety net. I've made some amazing friends here, people who support me and genuinely care. They've even helped bring in more crochet orders. Being in college has opened me up to new ideas, new people, and a kind of freedom I never had growing up. And this is a little unexpected, but I've started dating someone. His name's Kyle. We've only been together for 2 months, and we're still figuring things out, but he's sweet, kind, supportive. We'll see where it goes. Every weekend, I still visit Grandma. We work together in our cozy little studio, knocking out orders and brainstorming new ideas. The business is thriving, and every time I see a happy client, I feel a little more confident in the path I chose. As for my parents, there's been total silence. My grandparents told me that after all the backlash from the family, my parents decided to pack up and move out of the country. I have no idea where they went, and honestly, I don't care. They left without ever apologizing or trying to make things right. That says everything I need to know. So now, I'm focusing on the life I built, the one I've always dreamed of. To everyone who's followed my journey, thank you. Your support has meant everything. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Surround yourself with people who lift you up. Find your voice. Chase your dreams, even when others try to hold you back. Thanks to Grandma, to my amazing friends, and to all of you who believed in me, I finally feel free. This will probably be my last update. Thank you for listening to my story.